Passing arguments to RESTful web services. So what if we have to pass URI parameters or query parameters in with our request? HTTP request endpoints do have these types of parameters. Along with URI parameters and query parameters, sometimes even headers will need to be passed with our request. We can send form parameters with a request by setting them in the payload. We could also include attachments by adding an attachment transformer to your flow. In this next walkthrough, we'll look at just that, passing arguments to a RESTful web service. We'll modify the HTTP request endpoint to use a URI parameter rather than a static URI. We'll set the destination to a static value, create a flow variable to store the value of a query parameter, and finally set the URI parameter to the dynamic value of this flow variable. Let's get started. Back inside of Postman, let's go to our original request that we had made earlier in this module, where we went to mu.mulesoft-training.com/essentials/flights or united/flights. And then at the very end, let's put in a specific destination this time. In this case, we'll type in CLE for Cleveland. With CLE in place, you can see that the web service is smart enough to only give you that result set back. So what we're going to do is try to set ourselves up to respect the query parameter specifier that we have in our RAML file and map that into this URI parameter to the backend call. All right, let's now return to Anypoint Studio. And from within Anypoint Studio, we'll make sure we're in our implementation XML. I'll even take a moment to clean up some of these other tabs I have open. So all we need for now is the implementation XML. Let's double click on our United REST request endpoint. And inside of the path area, let's modify this slightly so that at the end of the path, instead of just flights, there's curly braces with the word destination inside of it. All right, so that's curly braces with destination. With that in place, and I'll make this just a little bit bigger here, we can click Add Parameter. And from the parameter section, we can choose URI parameter. The URI parameter name is going to map to what we have in the curly braces here. So let's put in destination. And for the value of that destination, let's put in SFO to see if our web service can bring back just SFO flights. Let's test this out now. If we save the application, and once again, if the application was already running, it should restart itself. Now in this case, we're just going to do a couple runs outside of debug mode. So I believe I'm in debug mode. I'm going to stop the project right now and just run it in normal mode. Feel free to check for the same. If you are currently in debug mode, just run it as a normal project. Now once this starts up, we're going to go back to Postman and make a similar request to what we did in the last walkthrough. So let's go to Postman here and bring up a similar request where we did localhost 8081/United. And let's hit send. All right. Now if you scroll through your results set here, you should only see flights that include the SFO destination. Now, let's say hypothetically in our service, and this is how we set up our RAML, we wanted to say a query parameter could be added where somebody could specify code and they could say something like LAX. If we hit send with code LAX as a query parameter, obviously it's not respected at this point. So let's see if we can set ourselves up so that we can map this query parameter to that URI parameter we just saw in Studio. Back inside of Anypoint Studio, I want to first capture the query parameter with you. And we want to store it in a flow var. There's a couple ways we could do this. We could potentially just use the inbound property from the query parameter, but we're going to just start off by storing it in a variable because it's going to be useful to us a bit later. Let's start off by searching for variable in the palette and drag that variable to the left of our United REST request. We'll select our variable and of course set a new variable. For the name, let's specify code as our variable. And we are going to capture an expression. So since this is in the inbound request, that means it's going to be part of message.inbound properties. Inside of inbound properties, it will be a HTTP query parameter. And then from within query parameter, we can ask for the code query parameter. All right, now we're going to capture that query parameter code and store it in a flow var called code. Now, in the United REST request, if we double click, rather than statically passing SFO, we'll go ahead and put in the flow variable. And in this case, for flow variable, we'll do .code. All right, now that we've got .code in place, let's save up our application. Once again, as long as it's running, it should simply restart here. And once we restart, we'll send that same LAX request in through Postman and see if it actually filters correctly. So back to Postman. And with code LAX in place, let's hit send. All right, and there we go. We've now got LAX results. If we switch that up to be CLE and hit send, we now have CLE results. So we've now created a structure where our query parameter is somewhat respected in that we map it to our URI parameter for the backend call. Now, what would happen if we didn't specify code based on what we just implemented? Let's try it. If we send a request in without code, we get this really ugly message coming back telling we have a null pointer exception. It tried to access that value and came up with null. So this would be a great opportunity to just take a quick breather on the REST call and enhance our MEL expression to make it a little bit smarter in order to determine what to do if there's no query parameter to grab. So let's go back to AnyPoint Studio and select our variable transformer again. So we still want to use the message inbound property query param code, but only when there's a value there. So let's change this expression a bit. Inside of this expression, we are going to put in message, and I'll put some spaces here. We're going to kind of bring this all together in a moment. Message.inboundProperties. Okay. In fact, what might be easier for us here, let's just grab the initial part that we had here and paste that. So I'll have you delete that if you were typing with me. And let's just make a duplicate of the message.inboundProperties on both ends. Okay. So what we want to check for in the first half is see if it equals empty. Remember, in the MEL section, we talked about how empty represents null or a blank string and things like that. So if it equals empty, we'll put a question mark here, a ternary operator. If it's empty, let's give it the value SFO, okay? Now, in between SFO and in between message.inboundProperties HTTP query params code, let's put a colon in, okay? And you want to be sure you've got SFO space colon space and then the other value. Now, what this means, if it's your first time reading kind of one of these inline if or ternary expressions, all it's saying is, this is my condition. The question mark is saying, if it's true, the left side of the colon will be the result. If it is false, the right side will be the result. So in other words, if it comes in blank, we should always get SFO. And if it comes in with a value, that value should be respected. So let's see if it works out for us. We'll save up the application. Once the application restarts, we're going to head back into Postman once again. And first, let's try a request without anything being specified. As we had discussed, SFO should automatically be picked up inside of here for all of our results. And we still should be able to come in here and say code equals LAX and still get specifically the LAX flights, as we can see right inside of here. So there's a little expression for you that is conditional and allows us to take on that use case.